Welcome to the Pro Aging Podcast. I'm Steve Gurney, founder of the Positive Aging Community. We're thrilled to have you join us for interactive discussions with pioneers and thought leaders on a wide variety of topics related to aging and longevity. These insightful discussions and the Positive Aging Sourcebook are brought to you thanks to the support from our Positive Aging Community champions. Visit proaging.com to connect with them and discover hundreds of valuable other resources. We're excited to have you with us today, so let's jump into an engaging Positive Aging live and interactive discussion. All right, today, folks, I am with Jane Stelboum, and we are going to be talking about the essentials of brain longevity and Alzheimer's prevention. Jane, so excited to have you here today. Before we dive into this important topic, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Well, thanks, Steve, and thank you for having me on. It's a topic I feel very passionate about from personal experience, and I'll talk about that in a bit. But just to give you a little sense of who I am, I actually grew up in the advertising agency business, a very high, right, a very high stress, long hours, demanding clients, eccentric personalities, creative personalities. I loved it. But it did come with a lot of stress. And so I have always practiced yoga on and off for my whole life. And I was a yoga student who kind of recognized that doing yoga once or twice a week wasn't quite enough. I knew that it could play a more important role in my life. And so in 2009, 2010, I went through some teacher training, just thinking that I wanted to sort of deepen my own practice. But I did become a yoga instructor, and I've been teaching since then. But at that same time, I was dealing with my mother who had Alzheimer's disease and also Lewy body dementia. She was diagnosed with both. And so I learned to use a lot of the techniques that I learned in my training with my mother to help her maintain a quality of life. And I'll share some of those techniques with you today as we talk. And as I was doing that, as I was doing my training, I actually had to do, when I went into some more advanced training, I had to do a research project. And I decided to investigate and explore how yoga can actually scientifically impact the brain. And I came upon an organization called the Alzheimer's Research and Prevention Foundation. And they were focused on, just like their name said, research and prevention. And I began to glom on to their research, and they were researching different lifestyle choices that we can make to keep our brains healthy, manage our brain health, and specifically a meditation, which is kind of exciting. I could share a little bit of that with you later too. And so I created these workshops so that I could share some of these tools of yoga and the research from the Alzheimer's Research and Prevention Foundation. And I founded a company called Sarasvati. And I always say, leave it to an ad girl, someone in the advertising business, to come up with the name of a company that nobody could say or spell.
Good. I'm glad. I wanted you to pronounce it, not me.
Yeah. It's rare that anybody gets it right on the first or even second try. And the story behind the name is that my mother's name was Sarah. And I actually went to one of my yoga instructors who was a Sanskrit scholar, and Sanskrit is the language of yoga. And I told him that I was starting this company and that I was sharing tools of yoga. and other lifestyle choices around Alzheimer's prevention and brain health. And I wanted to honor my mother in some way. And he said, easy. There's a Hindu goddess, Saraswati, and she was the divine mother of wisdom and knowledge and learning. And you can use that in some way. And I
Wow.
did. And the kicker was that my mom was an elementary school teacher for many, many, many years. So she was an educator. She did impart knowledge. She clearly taught me so much in my life. She introduced me to yoga as a teenager. She bought me my first meditation cassette tape, which I realize ages me just by saying that. Um, so, in her honor, my company is Saraswati. And what I do is I travel around wherever anybody will invite me, and I teach the tools of yoga and other lifestyle choices and how they can, in an evidence-based way, how they can help minimize our risk of Alzheimer's. There's no guarantees, obviously, but how we can minimize our risk because science and research shows we can, and how if we're already impacted, whether someone who's been diagnosed or somebody who's caring for a loved one or caring for a client, how you can use these tools as well to maintain quality of life, like I did for my mom.
I love
And
it.
so that's basically who I am and what I do.
Great. Well, I'll make sure to put the links to your company and how people can get in touch with you in the show notes. But let's kind of dive in. I'm intrigued now. What can we do? And you said you're going to show a few demos. I love it. But
Mhm.
I'll let you drive the bus here. Like, what are some of the things that we can be doing to help ourselves and the people around us?
Well, first, the first thing I like to do is kind of share why I think it's possible, right?
Okay.
And like the Alzheimer's Research and Prevention Foundation, I believe prevention is possible, right? The idea of prevention is fairly new in the Alzheimer's world, right? For years and years and years, it's been about finding the cure. And that is, of course, very important, vitally important. But there was very little conversation about prevention. And this organization is knew that there was something about prevention before anybody else would talk about it. And so we now know through research and science that neuroplasticity and neurogenesis are real concepts. And what those mean, neuroplasticity is the ability to grow new connections between brain cells, new neural pathways by using your brain in new and different ways. The brain loves change. Okay, so when you use the brain in new and different ways, we'll talk about that a little bit too, we can create these new connections. We also know that we can create new brain cells. That's neurogenesis. And for decades, we thought, well, as we age, we lose brain cells. And that's true. As we age, like everything else, we lose bone mass, we lose brain cells, but we could actually generate new brain cells. So now that we know that those concepts are reality, now we know that we can take steps to make that happen. And so, what I prescribe is the 4 pillars of Alzheimer's prevention, and that was developed by the Alzheimer's Research and Prevention Foundation. But if you go and you look at the Mayo Clinic, Cleveland Clinic, lots of different neurology practices, you'll see very similar concepts. So I like to start with the first pillar, which is stress management. And it's important to know why stress is so bad for our brain and why it's important to manage our stress. So, do you have stress in your life, Steve?
Oh, absolutely. You
Yeah,
know,
right. When
in fact,
when
I think I actually, I, I've been accused of needing stress to
yeah,
survive, like the sports that I participate in, and
yes, yes, yes.
they add stress to my life.
Yeah. Well, a certain amount of stress is good, right? It keeps our heart resilient. But what happens when we are under chronic stress, and certainly if we're suffering from a terrible disease, we're suffering with stress. If we're caring for somebody, we we, um, we have a high level of stress, but we stress over big things like health and what's going on in the world and finances and loved ones, and those are big things. And then we stress over little things like, well, what am I going to cook for dinner? What am I going to wear today? Did I spend enough time with this person or that person? Little things. And our brains and our bodies don't really distinguish between big stress and little stress. So they just know it's stress. And especially if you choose to live in an urban area like where we are, there's just stress all around us. So when that happens, our body is secreting cortisol. Cortisol is a stress hormone. It's that fight or flight hormone. And it's critically important in a situation where you need to be highly aware. And I mean, think about, I always use this silly example of like you're driving in your car and you stop at a light and a bear comes out of the woods and stares at you. And you're sitting there at your steering wheel and your eyes dilate to take in more info, and your skin starts to get sweaty and your heart is beating and it's trying to pump blood to your extremities so you can respond to danger. And then the bear decides, eh, nothing here, and walks off. And then everything returns to normal. And that's the way cortisol is supposed to work. But when it's in your system in a chronic way, it's wreaking havoc with the body. So it's creating high blood pressure and heart disease, and it's killing your immune system. And it's just doing all these terrible things, including killing off brain cells. So it literally kills brain cells. So we have to find ways to manage our stress. So, okay, do this with me, Steve. Just
Okay.
take a comfortable seat. Sit comfortably. Okay. If it feels okay to you, close your eyes. If it doesn't, just gaze at a spot in front of you softly. Good. Bring your attention to your breath. And without changing it or judging it in any way, follow the breath as it moves in and out of the body. And notice the length of the breath. Again, no judgment. If it's long or short, if it feels rough or smooth, like it's just gliding in and out, or is it getting stuck? Notice if the breath is wet or dry. Or where the expansion is taking place in the body. Where do you feel the breath expand on the inhale? And where do you feel the body contract on the exhale? Stay here for another moment, just watching your breath, feeling the breath. When you feel ready, slowly open your eyes and let everything back into focus. So how did that make you feel?
Well, that was really good, and I'll tell you, like I'm not uh I'm a part-time yoga person. It seems like I go to yoga classes when I have injuries and things like that, and I was like, oh, I love this, and I need
Hmm.
to keep on going, but then I feel better and I stop going. But what I like about that exercise, which I've done similar exercises like in a yoga class, but what I liked is that you let me just breathe the way I'm naturally breathing versus,
Hmm.
breathe through your nose and out your mouth and hold it for 5 seconds and all this.
Right,
I'd never had
right.
anybody uh, kind of let me take control of the breathing at my pace and not, you just study it versus
Right.
follow something, which often becomes stressful for me because then I'm behind the class or what have you. That was
You're
really
doing
good.
it
A
right.
great technique. I like it.
Okay. And that was very quick, very short, but I think especially somebody like yourself, I think, right, who's a go, go, go kind of guy, right? That opportunity to just sit and breathe can quiet the mind, can bring down the stress level, can bring you into the present moment for a moment. And that's just vitally important for our brain health to be able to manage our stress. And there's lots of different ways to breathe. I could spend a whole hour talking about breath,
Hmm.
but there's lots of different ways to breathe. There are lots of ways that people manage their stress. Some people like to knit, some or crochet, some people like to walk in nature. Whatever that is for you, taking that time in the day, even if it's 5 minutes of breathing, is so critical to your brain health. So that's really the first pillar. The second pillar is about our diet and what we eat and what we put in our bodies. And that adage, you are what you eat, is so true. And the other adage is what's good for your heart is good for your brain. So if you're eating in a way to take care of your cardiovascular health, that's good. That's good for the brain. In 2018, the Alzheimer's Association presented at their international conference a study around diet, and they focused on the Mediterranean diet. The Mediterranean diet has been the most researched diet of all different diets. Um, and in that research, they talked to 6,000 older adults, and they found that those who stuck to a Mediterranean diet had lowered their risk of Alzheimer's by 30 to 35%. Now, the Mediterranean diet is known for being focusing on beautiful, colorful fruits and vegetables, lean, good quality proteins. So you can have chicken, you can have fish, you can even have meat if it's limited and it's a higher grade, good quality meat. Okay. Um, Whole grains, nuts and seeds and legumes, and all of that. So it's a broad diet. It gives you a lot of flexibility. And so, of all the diets, that's the one that keeps bubbling up to the surface. And there was a lot of excitement around that at that particular conference with the Alzheimer's Association. There have been other studies around that diet. There was one in Germany in 2021 that showed that those who followed a Mediterranean diet had lower levels of the amyloid plaque and the tau tangles that are the physical manifestation of Alzheimer's disease. And people had better memory performance as well. And then studies that show that people who eat diets that are high in flavonoids, right? So that's in strawberries and oranges and peppers and apples and tea and cocoa, um, uh, some wine, little bits of wine,
Hmm.
were also good. So paying attention to what you eat is another essential
Yeah.
lifestyle choice that we can make to minimize our risk.
And yeah, and I know there's a lot of talk around the mind diet,
Yeah.
which is basically, I think it stands for Mediterranean intervention, neurodegenerative delay, or something like that.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
but
yeah.
it's basically, and also, the other thing is just preservatives. All of the process, just doing our best. There's
Absolutely.
one thing eating plant-based, but just trying to avoid all the processed foods that are out there.
Right,
Um,
right.
so,
The Mind diet is very similar to the Mediterranean diet. A lot more focus on berries in your
hmm,
fruit selections, both low salt, but Mind in particular. But very similar concept as the Mediterranean diet. And those are, and you're right, that's another diet that usually bubbles up to the surface. And I agree. I mean, the more plant-based you can be, the better, but it doesn't have to be all plant-based. The more
yeah.
organic you can be, the better, but that can get expensive. And so you might select foods that, like, I like to make sure if I can that my dairy is organic and my berries or my fruit are organic as much as I can,
Oh, that's a
but
great
it's hard
approach.
to find and
Yeah.
it is expensive. So,
Yeah.
um, you know, um, you know, having things like smoothies that break down the food so that it's digested even similar. So I try to have a smoothie on most days, where I'm using the whole fruit, all the pieces of the fruit. It's not a juicer that
Hmm.
takes out all the fiber. It includes all the fiber. So yeah, paying attention to like not having those ultra processed foods,
Yeah.
low sugar, all of that good for the brain.
Great. All right. Okay.
Okay.
What's next? What's our
Next,
next
next is exercise. And there's two kinds of exercise. There's physical exercise and there's mental exercise. Okay. So research shows that if you exercise physically at least 150 minutes every week, even less, like 90 minutes if you're doing heavier strength training, right? That can minimize your risk by anywhere from 50 to 70%. Pretty significant. And that's because the brain needs constant glucose, constant blood, and constant oxygen. And exercise, as we know, helps that to be. So the best kinds of exercise are the kinds that you will do, right? So often people say, well, which kind of exercise? Well, the kind that you'll do, right? But also, remember I said earlier how the brain loves change? So, and this goes to diet as well, like changing up the food that you eat, right? And changing up the exercise that you do. So, if you walk in the woods for 3 miles every day and you're saying, I do that, I'm fine. Well, no, that's not true. Okay. Because every day you're doing the same thing. You're seeing the same things. Your brain does not need to work very hard. You're getting the blood flow, and that's important. You're getting the oxygen to the brain. But if you want to create those new neural pathways and those new brain cells, you need to up your game and change it up. So change your pattern of walking. Maybe you do some high interval walking and then slow walking and high interval walking and slow walking. Maybe you walk a little bit and then you take a couple of squats. or a lunge or two, or you take a different path. You change it up. And when you combine physical exercise with the mental exercise, that's gold. So when you're walking and you're playing mind games, like you're walking and you're trying to remember all 50 states, or you're walking and you're counting backwards by sevens, or you're walking and you're thinking of words that begin with P, right? That helps to stimulate the brain as well. Now, because I'm a yoga instructor, okay, I like to teach how yoga can impact the brain, and yoga is absolutely a form of exercise. It's not as rigorous unless you're doing hot power yoga, which probably is not happening at this point, right? But I could show you how different types of poses can affect your brain.
I love
Okay,
it.
up
Yeah.
for that? Okay, you can join
And
me if you like.
well, I'm not really in that great of a space to do that, so I'll just
Right.
observe. But
Okay.
but I will tell you, I physically when I'm doing yoga, it is a workout. Me just
Yeah.
sitting there with my legs crossed, I start breaking into a sweat because I
Yeah.
don't stretch that much. And
Yeah.
then the brain exercises, listening to the instructions,
That's
that the
true.
instructor is giving you. I always
Right.
find that to be a, a very engaging, let's say.
Yes. Yes. And and I don't think I said this at the beginning, but I do teach a lot of classes for 55 and above. Okay. And so I always weave brain exercises into my yoga class. So, for instance, you can be in a warrior two position, right? We're famous in yoga for warrior poses. So you could be in a warrior two position, which can be here standing up, okay? Or it can be on a chair like so,
Hmm.
right? But then, well, let's roll that front arm forward. And then let's roll that back arm back. And suddenly this becomes a brain exercise, right?
Mm-hmm.
Also, the front of your body is doing something different than the back of your body. So the brain likes that. It likes when you're doing different things. Okay. So I think about it sometimes in terms of the type of poses. So you could be taking, let's say that you're having a particularly stressful day and you need to quiet your mind and take it down a notch. You could come onto your elbows and place your forehead on your hands and take like a seated child's pose in a way, right? Like just kind of here in a forward bending posture. Now, if your spine is nice and healthy, you could take a full forward bend and touch your toes. I like to be careful about how deeply I take people down because as we age, we have issues in our spine. So I try to keep that pretty safe. Okay. If I'm on the mat, I teach lots of seniors who are in chairs and lots who are on mats. You could take a child's pose here on the mat. And this is an opportunity to sort of shut out the outside world. Lost my ear thing there. Okay. So forward bending postures can be calming and cooling and work towards that stress management, right? But on the other hand, back bending postures, so I could take a standing camel pose, for instance, where I reach way up and then I take my hands behind my back, just pressing into my back so that I could press the hips forward and lift the heart a little bit, bring the elbows together and find an arch in the spine. I could do that here, and I could do that in my chair by by sitting on the edge, holding on to the back, planting my feet lifting my heart, and taking a back bend. Back bends are opening up all this space in the heart and the lungs, and they're more energizing. So if you feel like I'm a little sluggish, I feel a little brain foggy, I need to up my energy a little bit, back bends can be a nice technique. Okay. If you're feeling agitated, and we know that when we care for people with Alzheimer's, sometimes they go through sundowning, right? And they may start to feel agitated and nervous and jittery. I like to invite them to take 2 feet on the ground. And I do this for myself. Standing poses or seated poses when you have both feet on the ground and you can feel the earth beneath your feet, that steady, stable foundation, right? So any standing pose, a mountain pose, a chair pose, a warrior 1 pose, a warrior 2 pose, where 2 feet are rooting down, can be very grounding and kind of also calm us down, right? And help us feel a safe foundation. My favorite, though, and I always incorporate these into my classes, are balance poses. And I could hear, your audience going, oh, I can't balance. Well, anybody can balance. I can be right here in a seated position. Move that out of my way. Okay. I can be right here and I can lift one leg and my body's out of balance. I can take a tree pose in my chair by extending a leg and bringing a foot up. And my body's out of balance, but I could still be in that tree pose. And when my body's out of balance, my brain has to click in, right? I can be in a balance pose next to a chair or a wall for support. And I can take it here with my toe on the ground. Here's a tree pose right here. Or if my balance is pretty good, I can take it here or here, right?
Mm-hmm.
The trick with balance poses is that you have to work towards your edge, right? You have to find that place where you're safe. Safety is most important of all, right? But you're working towards your edge so that not only are you working all the muscles in your feet and your ankles and your legs, but your mind is focused on only one thing, not falling.
Mm-hmm.
So balance poses help to foster focus, concentration, and attention. And one more thing I'll say too, actually, is poses that cross the body. So we can stand by a chair, we can cross our leg and put our toe in the ground and sit low. These are eagle legs, right? If I'm able to, I've got my kickstand foot, I can cross my arms in different variations of eagle pose. Your brain loves that cross action, right? So weaving poses into classes that help the brain click in, right? That's some way that yoga yoga is an exercise tool as well, but it actually weaves into all the different pillars. Okay. So the only thing I have to say more about exercise is mental exercise. Because people will say to me all the time, I do my puzzles every day.
Yeah.
I do Sudoku, I do the crossword every day. Okay, well, if you're doing the same puzzle every day and you've been doing that for years, that's not doing it anymore for you. That's not challenging your brain. You get to know the patterns in crossword puzzles, right? So you have to change it up. The brain loves change. So, like for instance, I always did the crossword puzzle. My husband always does Sudoku. So we started to switch, right? So now I do Sudoku, which is hard for me. I'm not that great with numbers. He's been doing the crossword puzzle. And, then we'll go back and we'll do the other because we like it. But you have to force yourself to do something different in order to make the brain work harder and pay attention. Okay. So all that I'll put in this category, things like you always hear people talk about learning a new language, or learning a musical instrument. Um, Doing something that's completely different is what the brain needs.
Hmm. No,
Do you do puzzles?
yes, and I've done, a few years ago, I went to the talk, a doctor was talking about the research and said exactly that is that learning a foreign language or a musical instrument that you're not used to playing is
Hmm.
tr also in video games,
Hmm.
strategy games, like the ones that the kids are playing, where there's all this thinking and strategy. And
Yes.
I'm not a video gamer, but I did a year of Duolingo with trying to learn how to speak Spanish. And next I would like to play around with a musical instrument.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That's great. I have a violin. I used to play violin in high school, and somebody gave us an old one that we want to refurbish. And that's my goal is to, and we also have a bass, a small bass. And so our goal in my household is to get those in working order and learn those. Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
it. I love it.
Yeah. All right.
Um,
Do I have time for two more
oh
quick
yeah,
things?
yeah, yeah.
Okay. Okay. So the fourth pillar, I mentioned there were four pillars, right? And we've got stress management, we have diet, we have exercise. The fourth one is it's called spiritual fitness, which is basically anything that connects you to something greater than yourself. So it can literally mean spiritual in terms of I belong to a church or a synagogue or a mosque, and this is my community, and I participate in my community, and I believe in this higher power. But it doesn't have to be that. It can be a connection to family or to friends or doing volunteer work. It's acknowledging that life is more about me, and that I'm connected to what else is out there. It could be a connection to nature and being out in nature. It's joining groups and participating in community. And that I think we know, and I know we've heard speakers talk about this all the time, right? You Isolation and loneliness is a killer,
Yeah, not
and it's a
healthy.
killer
Yeah.
for the brain.
Yeah.
So that is so important, um, and a lot of research has shown that that's a key factor in healthy aging,
I love
and
it.
yeah, yeah. And I can't really talk about Alzheimer's prevention and cognitive health without talking about sleep, even though it's not an official pillar.
Hmm.
Um, but um, I almost think it's the most important thing. I mean, we have to get a good night's sleep because we know how we feel when we don't get a good night's sleep, right? If How do you feel when you don't get a good night's sleep?
Oh, not very. I don't feel very well, but the one cool thing that I've got is my watch measures my sleep score every night, and I'll I'll glance at it every morning and look at the number. And the other day I had my lowest sleep score ever, and I mean I felt really bad. And I looked at it, I was like, well, this is pretty accurate here, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got one too. And I do use it as well. And I try to wake up and think, okay, how do I think I felt? Like, how do I think I slept, right? And how do I feel before I look at it? Um, but and I know that if I don't get a good night's sleep, I'm certainly foggy. I'm not clear. And how am I going to get through my day? How am I going to teach? And I still consult. How am I going to consult if I don't have a clear head? So the reason that happens is because when we go to sleep, when we get the right quality sleep, so it's not just about how long we sleep, but it's about the quality of sleep. And that's what many people don't focus on. Um, and that's what we see on our watches very often, right? How the different cycles of sleep and whether we had enough deep sleep or REM sleep. We need that deep sleep and that REM sleep because there's a process that goes on in our brains when we're in those deeper levels of sleep. And I like to call it pruning. It's like pruning your garden. So all day long, you're bombarded by information. Either you're watching TV, you're listening to the radio, you're reading the news, you're getting a million emails, people are chattering around you. And so you're bombarded by information and it's all going into your brain. And like literally, don't you sometimes feel like your brain is like exploding? Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Too much, too much. So when you go to sleep, just like the weeds take over, all those thoughts take over and they overwhelm everything else. And they overwhelm the good stuff, the nice flowers, right? If you go in and you prune your garden and you pull out those weeds, then the good stuff flourishes, right? You've created space for the good stuff to flourish. And that's exactly what happens in your brain. These glial cells come in and they literally go through all the information, all the data that's in your brain, and they weed it out and they say, and they organize it and they say, oh, this is insignificant. Don't need this, don't need this, don't need this, don't need this, don't need this. These are important ones. We're going to put them, they've got the good emotions that go with them, right? We're going to keep them. We're going to store these. We're going to store this information. We're going to store these memories, but we'll get rid of everything else. And so that when you wake up in the morning, it's like you've got this beautiful garden in your brain because all the unnecessary stuff is gone. And that process doesn't happen if we're not getting good levels of deep sleep. So it's so critical that we get that good sleep. And so yoga can play a role in a good night's sleep in a lot of different ways. The breathing, right? Just by breathing and calming the mind and watching your breath. Um, you can breathe in through the left nostril to stimulate the right side of the brain, which is the more calming side of the brain. Left nostril breathing before you go to sleep. Right nostril breathing is energizing. So when you need more focus, that's a good one. I used to do that one with my mother all the time, right nostril breathing. But for sleep, left nostril breathing. Taking some of those forward bends that I was talking about to calm and quiet the mind before you go to bed, and just gently, very gently stretching the body, right? Um, just to sort of open up physically and open up energetically before you go to bed can help you be more comfortable when you go to sleep. Maybe eliminate some fidgetiness or some soreness. So stretching gently, um, breathing, light reading, but not on a screen. Basically, good, we call it sleep hygiene these days. That's the new
Hmm.
fancy term, right? Tells us to really prepare to go to bed at least 2 hours before you're going to sleep by doing something quiet, quieting the mind, staying off of screens, taking a warm bath or shower, having a cup of tea, reading a regular book, doing the stretching or the meditating
Mhm.
or breathing. And that can help both the quantity and quality of your sleep. So
And
that's really important too.
yeah, and one thing that I found, and it's proof in my sleep score, is not eating 2 to 3 hours before you go to bed, having all your food digested. I really found that that was a tremendous made a tremendous difference
Yes,
in my sleep.
yes,
Um,
that's a good one.
Man, these are great reminders and tips that I've never heard before. So, and just really a great way to live our lives, and especially uh, for those of us that are caregivers or working with older adults, it's also things that we can implement. If we practice it in our own lives, it makes it even easier for us to work with our clients or our loved ones in the case of your mom.
Yeah.
Anything that we haven't really covered today that you want to make sure that we know about?
Just to reinforce that these are tools, right? How you breathe, um, just breath awareness like we did, how you move, getting that right kind of exercise, getting good night's sleep. These are all tools that you can use for yourself. But as you just said, I want to reinforce these are great tools for caregivers to use in the care of their loved ones, but also to help themselves. So, caregivers are among the highest risk group of people when it comes to stress. And some of the research that the Alzheimer's Research and Prevention Foundation did was among caregivers because they recognized that they were a high stress group. And so, like I've often gone out and done caregiver trainings, um, to senior living communities or to in-home care companies so that they have more tools in their toolbox. But also, sometimes I do one-on-ones with clients, and I love it when the caregiver is there with us. So that, I'll do a one-on-one session with somebody who has mild cognitive impairment or early Alzheimer's. And I love it when the caregiver is there too, because they need it for themselves, and there are things that they can do together. And that's so important. Um, and the last thing I'll say to close is that um, no matter where you are on this spectrum of I want to prevent it, I have it, I'm caring for someone who has it, living in the present moment, not worrying about what came before and what's coming next, it is gold, right? And so connecting to the breath, acknowledging the present moment, um, living in the moment uh, is the best.
I love it.
I'll leave it at that. Yeah.
Jane, this has been amazing. You really have a very thoughtful approach and demeanor. I feel 100% better today, especially since we started off with your great breath coaching.
Yeah.
But and then just you, folks can how do I'll share your contact and your website. But what are some of the things that folks can get when they work with you?
So I often go into senior living communities and or I do parlor talks where somebody invites me in to talk to like 10 of their friends, or I'll do speaking engagements and I'll share specific tools, so some specific ways to breathe or a specific way to meditate or move, kind of like I did here.
Hmm.
Um, and it depending how long we have together, I can take them through a full practice
Okay.
a full yoga practice. If I came in and I met with you individually or in a group, we would breathe together, we would move together, and we would do a short meditation together.
Okay.
And I would relate all of that to how it impacts your brain health.
Great. And then, so you do programs for organizations and groups. Do you do any one-on-one coaching?
I do. I do
Okay,
private
great.
one-on-one coaching. I'll go into people's homes and either teach you tools to, again, prevent or, when I work with people who have early Alzheimer's, um, I just have a wonderful time with them.
Hmm.
And I think they really enjoy it. I'm told that they really look forward to it during the week because it gives them an opportunity to get out of their fog a little bit, right? It gives them an opportunity to feel themselves move, to feel their breath, and to clear their minds a little bit. And I think they appreciate that, and their caregivers do as well. Yeah.
I love it. All right, Jane, thanks so much. I can't wait till our next discussion. Let's stay in touch
Okay.
and
Would love that.
folks reach out to Jane.
All right. Thank
All
you
right.
so much. As we say in yoga, namaste.
Namaste.